Hello and welcome to TADSummit Asia 2021. My name is Alan Quayle. I'm the founder of TADSummit. Now, I'm going to be giving two sessions in this presentation. The first is just a quick welcome and introduction to how TADSummit Asia works, and then I'm going to do a deep dive into programmable communications. That's going to be the second half. So, TADSummit has been running since 2013. The first ever TADSummit was held in Bangkok in 2013, just before the coup. And this was back in the days where we could have physical contact. Hopefully it won't be too long before we can get back to those behaviors again. And the focus was programmable communications. We had some of the leaders in that segment. So you can see Martin Ectors, you can see Jose de Castro. He was the CTO for Tropo that was bought by Cisco. They were one of the early CPaaS. Now, how TADSummit Asia works. The focus is programmable communications, and we have special themes on conversational intelligence. That is understanding conversations between people. We also have a theme on identity and fraud. Identity and fraud provides important insights about a customer or an employee as they're accessing one of your systems. And it's not just a security issue. There are also those insights enable you to help customers to get to what they want as fast as possible. So it has actually a very important impact on customer experiences across all the different journeys a customer has with a brand. Open source is a foundational component of TADSummit and will always be there. And we have, thanks to Craig Richards, a workshop on quantum computing. Now, for TADSummit Asia, there's no registration. It's a pandemic. Everything's online. So we're just wanting to get this content as widely distributed as possible. So everything is posted on the agenda, the slides, the presentations. So at this URL, through the month of May, you're going to see more and more content added. So by the end of May, everything that's presented will be at that URL. Now, the presentations are pre-recorded, not live. We're not trying to get you to be online at a particular URL at a particular time because of all the time zones involved in TADSummit Asia. Also, we can't meet in person. So, hey, let's just get this content out there and make it easy for you to access whenever you have time, through the day or even on the weekends. And we release one presentation per day through May. Now, Q&A, because again, it's pre-recorded, is done through the comment section. Each presentation has a weblog devoted to it, and you can ask questions there in the comment section for each weblog. Also, when we publish the presentations, we will be on social media, Twitter and LinkedIn, never Facebook. You can ask questions there of the presenters. And please do ask questions. You're going to see a lot of world-class content, and I'm sure you'll have questions to ask on that content. And also a big thank you to our presenters for taking the time to share their insights. We really do have a world-class lineup. I still have a few more presenters' photos to add. We're just waiting on them to send their photos through, but I wanted to get this presentation recorded and in the can. So that's the introduction. Hopefully that helps you understand what TADSummit is all about. So let's get down to reviewing programmable communications. Now, as you can see, I'm independent. So I'm not trying to push a product. I'm not trying to push anything here. I'm just trying to share with you my view, what this market's about, what the major trends are, and hopefully leave you with some insight. So I'm going to cover three sections. First will be landscape, market sizing, and growth. Now, if you've seen previous presentations I've given, it's similar, but it's an update given the impact of the pandemic. We're going to look at some of the trends and strategies that we've seen through 2020 into 2021, and we're going to review what happened in 2020, because there was a lot that happened, not just with the pandemic, but in programmable communications. It's getting quite frenetic. I'm going to be looking at what that means, both now and into the future. But let's get down to just understanding the basic structure of programmable communications, the different sizes of the market segments, and how they're growing. So I have the CX tech landscape. CX stands for, well, it's customer, conversation, collaboration, communication, experience, tech, because that's the focus. It's on technology. It's the enablers. Now, underlying the whole of programmable communications is the enabling software and platforms, which are principally open source. And this is really a very important point with programmable comms. It's telecoms or communications done in a web way. And over 20 years ago now, several open source projects began, like OpenCloud and Asterix, that put these rarefied communication telecom technologies away from just the telco ecosystem and into the hands of developers everywhere. And that's what's created this programmable communications market. On top of that, we have like in-app communication, so like Agora, video that got bought by Enghouse, the CPaaS communication platform as a service. Now that can have two sides. There's like a voice side and a messaging side. Some CPaaS are a bit more voice centric, some are a bit more messaging centric. And then there's business messaging. So that's all, you know, I separate the two out because there are some just messaging, SMS focused aggregators and all the marketing campaign services that you have on top of that. There's then a whole range of automation technologies. So this is bots, speech rec. We just saw Microsoft buying Nuance, analytics, workflow management, knowledge management, conversational interfaces. For example, Symbol.ai are one of the sponsors for TADHack Global. So again, that's where they focus, helping people understand conversations in real time with a very easy to use API and all the marketing automation tools as well. And there's two principal sort of pillars are in programmable comms are employee communications. So this, of course, is unified communications, but also business telephony, phone systems, messaging, and collaboration, all about how employees work together. And then on the other side is customer communication. So, of course, once upon a time, it was called the call center. Now it's the contact center, but very much the tools we're building there. I've sort of talked about identity authentication, identity management, trust. This is enabling a transformation, not from just the contact center, but into a customer experience center. So it's across the customer journeys. There's a lot of tools that can be added in to make those experiences work to help customers and employees get to what they want as fast as possible. And then on top of all that is the enterprise channel, because a lot of enterprises don't buy direct from a technology provider. They have an IT shop, a local integrator that stitches all these pieces together. And I show a number of different companies there like Gamma. And when we look at what happened in 2020, we're going to see some interesting changes in the enterprise channel. So that's the landscape. As you can see, there's lots of pieces to programmable telecoms. It's not just CPaaS in any way. Here's some logos. It's a year-old slide, but I include it because, you know, even though, you know, like Cinch has bought Foxbone, Cinch has bought Voyant and Intelliquent, and we'll review what all those acquisitions mean. Sangoma, of course, last year bought VoIP Innovations, Appidays. It's now bought Star2Star, which is a UCaaS platform, but also has collaboration and CPaaS capabilities. We've seen sort of Telesign, Bix be up for sale, and then were bought out. And as you can see, there's lots of different companies there that have been involved in some interesting acquisitions over the past year. And of course, I've got up here in the corner here, Vonage, and there's Nexmo hidden behind there as well. And of course, there's Wavecell, which was an Asia PAC-focused CPaaS that was bought by 8x8 a year or two ago now. Now, what I do is I take all these companies and many more that sort of identify themselves as CPaaS. That is, they do both voice and messaging, not principally messaging. And we have here the lists of the revenues for 2018, 2019, and what their growth rates are, employees, simple description. Now, let's have a look in. I'll just show you this one, okay? Before the pandemic, this was 30%. But because bandwidth provides DIDs and of course the calling for Zoom, it's been a stellar year for bandwidth. So we've seen, and this is their actual results, their growth accelerate. So this reflects an average across those numbers. Now for international, ColtBix provide the numbers and the interconnect for voice. But you can see, and we're anticipating that, that acceleration, it stays around, it doesn't crater. Okay, there is traffic that's going to continue through this year and into 2022 as well. Now, Voxbone is recorded separately simply because, but history, it helps me look at the different companies and then I roll it all up. So anyway, this is the bottom-up build. Okay, so then let's have a look at how that all gets added up into a CPaaS number. Now, before I show you that slide, I want to give a little bit of a review of the impact of the pandemic on CPaaS and messaging. It depends on your customer mix, okay? If you've got web companies with a role in e-commerce or work from home, you've seen massive acceleration in revenues. And I'll share with you some of those numbers in this presentation. If your principal focus is traditional retail, travel verticals, you've seen some significant revenue declines. But even that said, web companies, let's say Airbnb, their CPaaS traffic has been pretty solid, simply because as lockdowns came in, there was all the traffic in basically doing rebookings and all the communications that happened around that. And you know what? People are traveling. Let me share with you some numbers. So this is US travel, but this is the TSA checkpoint travel numbers. This orange line is back before the pandemic in 2019, and this is 2020. So this is showing the latter second half of 2020. And you can see big gap, smaller gap. So we were about 45% of pre-pandemic numbers. Now, that's closed quite significantly. This is looking now in the first quarter of 2021. And of course, we have to compare it to 2019 numbers rather than 2020 numbers, as you can see. That's when lockdowns kicked in. We're now at 65%. So one quarter, 20% increase, absolute. And likely by the summer, we'll be at 80 to 85%. So people are traveling. So even though for many people that are in large corporations that have a very strict work from home policy, for many small, medium businesses, for many people just from a personal perspective, they're traveling. And overall, the impact of the pandemic is about a 10 to 20% decline. So it has impacted a lot of businesses negatively. Now, of course, Zoom, Twilio, we've seen 100% plus growth, crazy numbers, but they're exceptions. When we look across the market, roughly 5% of the programmable comms market have seen a 30% increase on pre-pandemic estimates. 30% have seen a 10% increase, 45% are relatively unchanged. There's been positive, negative, and 20% have seen a decrease. So overall, it's been good for the market. I'm going to give some more quantification on what that means later in this presentation. But you can see it's mixed results overall. So that's just the travel numbers, just to show you that people are traveling. And here's the CPaaS market size. Now, so this is billions here, so 10 billion, 15 billion. This is looking out across the timeline that I showed you. I break it down by this core API. So this is this orange line. So that's the sort of voice messaging piece. But I also break down all the other services that I see CPaaS providers offering, such as business messaging. Because let's face it, Twilio offers email, not just SMS. There's also SIP trunking. And you might go, well, SIP trunking is a telecom service. It's not programmable communications. Well, if it's dynamic, so it's on demand, if you've bundled it with a ton of value-added services, it's programmable communications. IoT, so that's like the SIMs. Also, we've seen CPaaS bundling up contact centers and unified communication platforms. So CPaaS, if you say it's a CPaaS company, their revenue mix is actually a lot more complex than just voice and messaging APIs. I'm going to come back to that a number of times when we understand the revenue structures within programmable communications. And in July 2020, Twilio showed the pandemic had been very good to it with 132% growth. Now, Zoom achieved major numbers, 355% in August was announced, but they're in the enterprise communications. So I'm going to count for that in a separate bucket, okay? But one point I want to make is as we look at these curves, the exceptions don't make the market, okay? They are amazing numbers, but you have to look across all the different providers, and that's where we end up with these curves. Now, some of the interesting things, as we look in a little more detail on the core API, that's achieved here, really 2020 into 2021 is peak compound annual growth rate of about 35%. We're going to see that tail off quite significantly in the coming years. Where we're seeing significant acceleration from the CPaaS providers is around the applications. So that, of course, is contact center, unified communications, authentication, and a whole host of other solutions and automations. So that's really, these are where we're seeing significant acceleration. Then, because we have that bottom-up build, I can then go, well, where the company is headquartered, let's start attributing revenues there. And you can see this is a heavily North American HQ'd revenue business. You can see here, Asia is underperforming. In 2020 was an unusual year in that we achieved revenue parity between Americas, EMEA, and APAC. Up until that point, Americas had been the biggest piece, but actually now it's roughly equal across for telephony revenues. And what I mean by that is fixed telephony and broadband, mobile voice, messaging and broadband. It's about a $1.35 trillion market, and we're more or less equal across those three segments. So if you're in this business, global coverage is actually important, because if you just focus on Americas, 2/3 of the revenue potentially is outside of your reach. So as you can see, this bias here is actually partially because most of the CPaaS are delivering into web companies, and those web companies serve globally. So again, that's why you're seeing that revenue concentration. While here, it's sort of more a regional focus, and that's true also in EMEA as well. The exception, of course, being Cinch. So let's move on to business messaging. So this is really focused on just doing the SMS piece, not trying to do SIP trunking, voice. They might have a little bit of voice in there, to sort of be fashionable and say, hey, we have CPaaS, but really, this is just my cut. I look at it as their business messaging. An example here is like IMI that was bought by Cisco. Yes, they position themselves as CPaaS. Cisco bought Tropo a few years ago. That was a CPaaS. They bought another, what they claim is a CPaaS. I really look at it more as business messaging. Also, we saw Value First. So that's an India-focused business messaging platform that was bought by Twilio recently. And I have up here that SendGrid. Just to include a logo there to say Twilio does business messaging. I included the Twilio revenues back when I showed the CPaaS graphs. So this is only going to look at the revenues, that aren't already included in CPaaS, okay? It'll become clear in a slide or two. Same bottom-up build, same inclusion on the impact of the pandemic. And what I show here is this is just the business messaging focused companies, and I add in so this is the total that includes the CPaaS business messaging, as well as just the pure play business messaging. Similar CAGRs, it's estimates. A lot of these companies don't publish revenues. So this is sort of, to an extent, guesstimates on my behalf, but you can see it sort of, roughly makes sense. And, no matter what people say about SMS being tired and it's like it's all moving to WhatsApp, we're still seeing that growth. Now, this is a bottom-up build. You will see A2P market sizes all over the shop. You'll see people saying it's $20, $30 billion. Well, all I can say is looking at these list of companies and the revenues I see for them, this is the total. Okay, so that gives you a feel for what we're seeing around all those SMS marketing campaigns and the alerts, notifications, etc. Interesting thing is I also did an estimate looking at those companies. Now, they have two major sort of revenue pots. There's aggregators, so it's what I call wholesale, so it's serving other aggregators. Or sort of, like a UCaaS or a contact center, so it's a wholesale business. But then there's enterprise. So this is servicing businesses for messaging. And quite often it's not just a raw API, you need some value add around there. It could be, for example, a portal to enable you to look at the performance of different campaigns. So what's interesting is the growth, and in part it's web companies and as a service is really driving the revenues there, rather than the more traditional aggregators, reselling to other aggregators. That's because quite often aggregators have a regional focus, so they have to resell to other aggregators to be able to deliver a global product to their customers. So moving on from CPaaS through business messaging into employee communications. Now I have here lots of logos again, and these aren't all, there's a lot more I could have added. We have unified communications, business telephony, phone systems. So this is the voice side. And then I have here messaging and collaboration. So this is voice as well, actually, but it's sort of, you hopefully can see, roughly how I sort of position the two, as this can have sort of a video piece on both sides as well. But look at Zoom, you can have Zoom conferencing and you can have the Zoom phone API. So that's the reason Zoom is in the middle and supplies into both sides. When we again look at the revenues, do a big Excel spreadsheet, we come out with this in terms of, we're looking at about 33 billion for 2021. And it's voice. Voice dominates by far. Messaging is a tiny piece of that overall market. Then I do want to emphasize, because voice and messaging are very different markets. And that's why you see some providers in the aggregation space very much focused on messaging, others focused on voice. Now, Cinch is breaking that rule, and it bought Inteliquent. It has a strong messaging history. So that is changing, and that's one of the structural changes we're seeing in programmable communications. But I just wanted to highlight that voice is big. And just to give you some numbers. Now, it is in decline. Mobile is about 300 billion. There's 4 trillion minutes a year in the US alone. That source is CTIA. International voice is 100 billion. Skype hasn't killed it yet. Also, there's about 200 billion in fixed VoIP. Now, of course, there's accounting issues there. How do you account for voice in mobile when it's basically a fixed fee? But the accountants have distribution, and people are still talking. In UK, they're still talking at 25 minutes per day, and that's from Ofcom. Now there is a subtle shift, but again, it's a slow step by step, because people still pick up the phone and just dial, where it's making it easy to embed voice calls anywhere, and that's voice APIs. And you have the Zoom phone API. I also have the Zoom conference API. So that whole service is just packaged up and easy to consume through an API. So that's one of the changes. And the reason voice is, remains in rude health is people make a bucket load of money in doing voice. Now, this is maybe a little biased, but you charge for 1 minute a cent retail at 75 kilobytes of data, which is 0.04 cents wholesale. So it's a big, well understood market, highly regulated market with a 96% margin. That's why some of those companies really do have a license to print money. So what I want to wrap up with is looking at customer communications. Again, same, lots of logos, and making some estimates on what their revenues are on the growth. Some are published, some are not. Again, it's a bottom-up analysis. So we're looking at about 18 billion, growing at over 20%. Now, what I did do is, when I was looking at those numbers, I broke out how many are using a voice or a messaging API, rather than doing direct deals with an aggregator or interconnect provider. And you can see it's growing. I mean, it's significant today. I'm going to show you some logos later on the type of companies that are using the voice and the messaging APIs rather than using a wholesale aggregator. Now, a little note that, this isn't interconnect. This is just using like the CPaaS API, and I've not included any of the value-added services. It really is just the voice component in there. So when we look at the contact center landscape, so I've divided into large, medium, small, and emerging. And they can use either wholesale interconnect providers or they can use CPaaS. A lot of these little guys here are using Twilio Flex because that's 95% of a contact center. So this enables you to basically get up and running and have a contact center offer within a month. Some of these providers here, for example, Aircall, still use Twilio, and they've raised a bucket load of money, and I'll share that with you later in this presentation. TalkDesk used to use Twilio. Once they came out as a competitor with Twilio Flex, they moved to direct deals. And it's part of growth. You have to focus on your core differentiation. And then as you build out that platform, as you scale up the organization, you then hire in the people that can help you deal with directly connecting to these wholesale providers. Because working with a CPaaS is easy. It's a credit card and a web sign up. Working with these guys takes a lot more effort. Same's true for UCaaS to an extent. You've got providers that do sit and use CPaaS providers, but generally because it's more voice-centric, they tend to, once they get any type of scale, go straight to wholesale interconnect because of voice. They might not for messaging though. So just to wrap up this section in the landscape, the key points I want to highlight are in 2021, across those main programmable communication categories, total revenue is around 75 billion. This is a big market. UCaaS is 33 and still growing. Contact center is 18 billion and growing quite healthily. CPaaS, of course, is 11 billion and continues to explode. Business messaging, 6 billion, still seeing good growth rates. Identity verification, I've included. This has potentially a massive TAM because of its impact on customer experience. And of course, crazy growth rates we're seeing there. And automation tech, for example, conversational intelligence. Now, there is overlaps. I'll give you an example, speech rec. So speech rec does fall in some of this with small companies, but like Nuance supplies into IVR, to contact centers, so it's included in here. So I've tried to minimize the overlaps between these numbers, but if you add all these up, you get more than 75. This 75 is just because I've sort of assumed there's some overlaps. Again, it's rough, it's order of magnitude analysis. So Twilio and many others do programmable communications. And you can see the CPaaS, atomic APIs, there's business messaging across SMS, IP, email. It's all messaging. There's aggregation, there's authentication, there's SIP trunking, contact centers as a service, automation technologies, IoT, and much, much more. So hopefully this has given you an appreciation for the richness that is covered in programmable communications. The way I think of it is it's really doing telecoms or communications in a web way. And this has created a well-defined, rapidly growing and big market. It's not just some value-added services layer around telecoms. Through 2020 and 2021, we're seeing massive consolidation in programmable communications. It's on a very different trajectory to telcos. And you'll see later, I'll be discussing how web and enterprise companies will start to do M&A of programmable communication companies. So we're going to see this rapidly evolve and separate from the more traditional telco providers. It's a very interesting time, not just through 2020 and 2021, through the rest of this decade, it's going to be very interesting in programmable communications. Okay, so that's the landscape. Let's now look at some of the trends and strategy. So again, you've seen this before. I gave it right at the start in terms of the landscape. Two of the big trends from a business perspective are consolidation. So it's volumes up, costs down. Cinch is a great example. They bought Wavy last year. They've bought SAP Digital Interactive, which is one of the duopolies of messaging providers in North America. They've bought Inteliquent, which is a big voice interconnect provider for over $1 billion. So we've seen some significant consolidation there. And it's generally been volumes up, costs down. We're not seeing much difference in price yet. It's going to take time. And there's some complexities there that I'm going to come to as we review some of the transactions through last year. And the other is moving up into applications, because that's where the margin is. That's where the growth is. We see in the analysis I've done previously, when we're looking at CPaaS, the core API has sort of reached its peak CAGR. It's not going to move any faster than that. We're going to see that fall compared to some of the other growth rates from the application business. I also want to spend a little bit of time looking at the structure of the programmable comms market, because quite often Twilio and Cinch are treated as the same thing, and they're not. I'm going to explain why they're not, and we're also going to see it's reflected in their M&A as well. So on applications, this is UCaaS, CCaaS, CPaaS, conferencing, identity, campaign management, etc. This is generally what an enterprise buys, either directly or through a channel. As well as service providers use those capabilities through an API. For example, a big area that's exploded over the last year are online gym services. They use the Zoom conferencing API. They don't need to be bothered about any of the conferencing stuff. That's just an API they use. They focus on the experience of providing an online exercise service. So that's at the top. Underlying that, of course, is technology. So that's telecom app server, machine learning, conversational intelligence, voice recognition, WebRTC, API management, workflow management, you name it. Now, this is all the cool stuff. This is the techie stuff that we all love, from open source projects like FreeSwitch, Asterisk, Dressio, Jambons, Phonos, WebRTC. There's lots of cool projects that are helping make the programmable communications market happen. It's dominated around build versus buy. There's lots of startups filling in technology gaps. So there's a regular stream of acquisitions thanks to all the technologies. And underlying all this is aggregation. Now, here are examples. Bix more on the voice side, Infobip, Mito, Cinch. And they have to build deals with hundreds of carriers and aggregators, number authorities, regulators all around the world, around voice, SMS, MMS, RCS, phone numbers, SIMs, interconnect, charging, all the different flavors that exist, like 10DLC here in North America, short codes, 1-800-SMS, SIP, VoIP, Volta, HD voice. And in compliance with each country's specific regulations. If you're sending a message in Japan, you better not have a URL in there, otherwise it's not going to get sent. So, this aggregation business tends to have specialized providers. And that's why and Cinch is a great example. This is what they do, the aggregation business. Now, of course, they do some applications, but it's not like Twilio, where Twilio's core focus is applications. So again, I just highlight this to emphasize that Twilio and Cinch are into very different businesses within the programmable communication space. Now looking at some of the trends and what it means in programmable comms. There's a 100-year mistake. I'm borrowing a friend's slides here, but the assumption is people want to talk. They still do. We're not saying they don't, but there's a strong trend away from just talking, and we've seen that, with the rise in messaging. The other mistake is, of course, voice is voice. It's the PSTN. Well, voice is definitely not just the PSTN. I think most of us are spending most of our time on conferencing and using WebRTC, not the PSTN these days. Also, another mistake, it's a 10-year mistake, is apps are how we interact with businesses, and that didn't happen. I'll give you an example. I drove up to a local garden center, and they were closed. And I was like, but why are they closed? I went up to the door just to see when their opening times were. And they didn't have opening times. They just had download our app. Well, I turned away and left and used Google instead to see when they were going to open. But we don't want yet another app. What this means is social media has ended up the winner out of this, the Facebooks, the Googles. You know, they dominate and have a strong position in terms of insight and customer data. And we need to address that. Now, also within an enterprise, there's two sides to it. There's the contact center, which is all about, unfortunately, how can we avoid using agents? So that's automations. Actually, automation should be about how can we get the customer to do, to enable the customer to do what they want as fast as possible. And when you take that approach, actually, it's the same thing, you get savings. Also, you get a customer that's very happy rather than frustrated in trying to use a particular type of automation. The other side are marketing and sales. So this is like the messaging campaign management that we saw, the business messaging, that a lot of CPaaS providers do as well as business messaging providers. And that's had a significant acceleration because it's associated with revenue. So that's one of the reasons why we've seen such investment. Now, as I mentioned, enterprises are turning to data. It's a differentiator. It's about understanding the customer and why they're wanting to do what they're wanting to do. Now, of course, social media is a dominant source, but there's a trust issue here. And of course, there's the old adage of the scorpion and the frog. So there's a river, there's a scorpion and a frog at one side, and the scorpion says to the frog, "Hey, can you give me a lift across?" And the frog goes, "No, I'm not going to do that. If I do that, you'll bite me and I'll die." Well, the scorpion goes, "No, why would I want to sting you? Because if I sting you, then we both die." So, of course, frog, being a kind spirit, was like, "Okay, jump on my back." And they're halfway across and immense pain. And it's like, "But why did you sting me? We're both going to die." It's in my nature. Facebook, Google, it's in their nature that basically the advertiser's message will be delivered no matter how inappropriate. We've seen the social unrest, the dysfunctionality in society at the moment from social media. So you have to use them carefully. And there's a great discussion. I interviewed last year Marlon Bowser, CEO of HDK, around data-driven customer experience and loyalty. One of the quotes there is, "The contextual relevance of voice, messaging, email, web chat are here for years to come." There is a role for WhatsApp, Facebook, Android, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't use them necessarily, but use them appropriately. Then just a few wrap-ups in terms of infrastructure. Again, with telecom infrastructure, it's built for the wrong reality. It's smartphones. And this is where I'm seeing lots of interesting innovations that recognize that it's these devices that dominate our interactions with brands. And it's got voice, texting, camera, mobile browser, and a whole boatload of contextual information from both the device and the telephone number. So using that, you can create some very slick experiences to get customers to what they want as fast as possible. That's really what it's about. It's not trying to avoid agents. It's getting customers to what they want as fast as possible in recognizing that it's a smartphone at the end of the call. Telco networks, they're built for privacy. Now, I know in North America, T-Mobile and several other telcos are selling their customer data, which is a mistake compared to, it's a tiny piece of revenue compared to their core, services revenue, and they shouldn't be doing it. But generally, carriers support privacy for their customers. And then CPaaS, again, it's a growing market. The focus has been sort of at an atomic level on voice and messaging, but really that's shifting, and we're seeing increased focus on conversations, and that's the conversational intelligence, which you're going to hear lots more about from presenters at TADSummit Asia. So the focus is moving up the stack to understand what it is that people are asking. So anyway, all these trends mean SMS and voice will remain in rude health. What I mean by that is they're basically going to continue to grow, no matter what people say about SMS being a tiled-old technology. Now, I know in the A2P business, telcos are starting to raise their SMS pricing. So we are seeing some business models around A2P messaging getting tough. But, and the analysis I did earlier with those growth curves do not assume telcos kill off the market, but there's a risk there, okay, just to sort of highlight. Social messaging is necessary, but it's not the answer, okay? WhatsApp, it's not going to replace SMS as fast as some people have claimed. Recognizing it's a smartphone, I think we're only beginning to do that. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Wholesale consolidation will continue. Margins will be squeezed, but this is a longer term. It takes a while to play out in that space. Applications are necessary for margin growth, and that application focus will move into conversations, insight, and customer experience. And it's all about getting customers to what they want as fast as possible, because that minimizes your costs. Right, so that's the trends. Now let's do a quick review of what happened in 2020, and I'm also going to include the first quarter of 2021. So let's go back to January 2020, a much simpler time, where our focus was actually the Australian bushfires and worrying about global warming. Industry discussion back then was how Zoom had just IPO'd. How's it going to maintain 85% growth? That's impressive. It was actually, are we going to see Zoom's price start to fall? How wrong could we be? Similar argument around Twilio as well, and how is it going to maintain this growth? There was some M&A. Interesting, for example, Comcast, an operations company, bought Blueface, a technology provider in unified communication as a service. So, this is a good example where a telco realized we have to own the technology if we're going to make margin. Cinch bought a box company, Serenova, which is contact center, bought collaboration video. And then by March, the lockdowns began. Now in Q2, M&A started to speed up. Cinch bought Wavy, so that's Latin America, market consolidation. Microsoft bought Affirm Networks, Metaswitch. 8x8 did an acqui-hire. Verizon copied sort of Comcast and bought BlueJeans, conferencing provider. Again, an example that, to make money, they need to own the technology. Cinch bought SAP Digital Interactive. So this is part of the, the duopoly of messaging within North America. But more importantly, it also gives them SAP as a channel to market to all those enterprises for its messaging market, for its messaging products. So that's a very important point. That really drives significant volume of business through Cinch as an aggregator. Aircall, which is an app on Twilio, raised 65 million on a 500 million valuation. And Matrix, which is really interesting, open source, a federated messaging company, raised a far more reasonably sized round. Now, by the end of Q2, Zoom announced double the growth it had shown previously. So, this is just a simple example of just the impact of the pandemic. MessageBird formally pivoted from being in the aggregation business into the business messaging side. From a social perspective, we saw basically a very unfortunate event that was a turning point in North America, where basically Middle America decided enough was enough, and there were marches throughout. So once you get basically sort of people who don't normally get out and protesting, it shows basically that it really was a turning point for America. Then we had the Beirut bombing. Again, it was graphed, but hundreds of people killed, thousands injured. A major event. Again, it sort of gets lost in the noise of the pandemic. But at the same time, M&A was getting faster. The numbers were getting even bigger. Agora went IPO and raised 350 million. Now, video, which was bought by Enghouse, very similar. It's not that different. It's, in-app communications. They were sold for less than revenue. Infobit raised 200 million. Payphone Identity raised 100 million. Bix, Telesign were put up for sale. Cineverse split in preparation for a likely M&A. AVC, which is an SPAC, special purpose acquisition vehicle, bought the CPaaS business out of Ribbon. Intrado bought Onset, that's unified communications. Dialpad bought High5, which is video collaboration. And there was Root Mobile, which is Indian-based business messaging, went IPO. And Ring Central were on a roll. Siemens, Avaya, Alcatel. They all had PBXs. They gave up, didn't try to build it themselves, and resold RingCentral. This is going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the market. Twilio achieved 132% revenue growth because, well, it has lots of web-centric customers, and as everything moved online, the web-centric companies, got a very good, impact on their business. RingCentral, which is more of a diverse set of customers, as you can see, had a lower growth rate. Then by Q4, we've got the vaccines started to roll out, and the M&A got even more intense. So Capgemini sold off its contact center business. Matrix bought Gitter. MessageBird, which had just pivoted, raised 200 million. Dialpad raised 100 million. Bandwidth bought Voxbone, so that's in the DID space. Twilio by segment, so this is customer data. So this is, again, analyzing conversations. So this, I think, is potentially one of those transformative acquisitions. We'll have to wait, but they've been doing very well since the acquisition. Inference, which is a bot platform, was bought by Five9. Infobip buys OpenMarket for 300 million. Salesforce.com bought Slack. Yeah, well, I mean, Slack did a very good job in making people buy messaging. Cisco buys IMI Mobile. I've already discussed that. Alianza bought Counterpath. Big ID, which again is identity verification, raised 70 million on $1 billion valuation. Cinch raised a boatload of cash. So they did 390 million with a new share issue. SoftBank bought a 10% stake for 700 million. So they raised over $1 billion. Then in Q1, looking at even more M&A. This is unprecedented, just so we understand just how active the programmable comms market is. Socure, which is very similar to Prove Identity, raised 100 million. Xeon, which is a European version of Socure, raised 10 million. Pindrop acquires Nextcaller, that's in caller recognition. Think, which is least cost routing, acquired Camino, that gives it preferential pricing on phone numbers. Quixendo bought NetSapiens, that's in unified communications. Genesys, big contact center provider, bought Bot Technology. Okta buys Auth0. This one, I'm going to come back to it later. So this is identity verification across both employee and customer, but a very important platform for enabling it to stitch together lots of different sources of identity between external databases, internal databases, etc. Gamma, which is a channel, bought Mission Labs, so contact center, unified communication. So a channel has realized it can't make money reselling, it has to own the technology. This really heralds a significant shift in the market. Net number, about a couple of private LTE companies. Twilio invested in Cineverse, which is an aggregator. So they invested, they didn't buy it, as we saw with Cinch buying SAP, Digital Interactive. So that I think relates to that span of control. Twilio is focused on apps, it's not focused on aggregation. It did buy Value First, which is on the business messaging side. Also, what's interesting is once Twilio invested in Cineverse, it then moved all its shortcodes over to Cineverse, which it had been predominantly using OpenMarket to that point. So that was a bit of a hit to the OpenMarket acquisition. Calera bought Mgage, that's again more messaging consolidation. Cinch bought Inteliquent. Inteliquent is a big voice interconnect providers. That was a biggie. Link Mobility bought Tismi. Proximus acquires Bix and Telesign for the same valuation as Socure. Sangoma by Startatar, it's another CPaaS it's acquired, as well as, of course, a significant UCaaS position. Yak, which is voice messaging, yes, voicemail, raised 7.5 million thanks to Slack Fund. Telco Switch buys OneVoice. Enkhouse buys a CPaaS, contact center as a service provider. Lots more going. So it's really has steamed up, and the vaccines finally started to roll out. Now, this slide was a lot more impressive when I was presenting it last year. This year now, well, it's a statement of the bleeding obvious. The first half of 2021 is going to be a long, hard slog with lockdowns, misinformation, division, high infection rates, and slow vaccine rollout. It's a statement of the obvious now. But summer will bring vastly lower infection rates. We'll have 20 to 50% people vaccinated. We're going to see lockdowns being removed extensively. And by Q3, at least in North America, we'll see kids finally back in school and most lockdowns being a thing of the past. So masks and vaccination certificates will be required. And then by the end of 2022, so not the end of this year, next year, we'll essentially jumped 10 years in 3 because the pandemic forced action. Most enterprises are, why fix what isn't broken? And that's been a challenge in getting people to move to as-a-service communication platforms. But through the pandemic, we've seen rapid adoption of as-a-service for work from home, operational band-aids. And what they've realized is, well, this works and it's cheaper and it's more flexible. And, oh, we really should consolidate onto this. And that's what we're seeing at the moment. And we're going to see through 2022, because it takes time to transition your platforms. So it really will be, by the end of 2022, it'll be as if we were in 2030 if there wasn't a pandemic. And we should remember that just like Spanish flu 100 years ago, people will forget. We're still living it. It's tough, but it will disappear. Just to highlight, even 100 years ago, there were the nose bandits. Don't ask me why some people insist on wearing their masks like that. As you can see, most people get it right. There's always one. But, history will repeat itself. Once we're into, at the end of 2021 into 2022, we will forget just how tough the pandemic was. Now, of course, consultants are making most of it and going, welcome to the new normal. Well, work from home, flexible working, hot desking, distributed global teams, they existed before. All that's happening is it's just a bit more common. Big corporations were often work from home anyway when you weren't in some big meeting somewhere, though some countries will see a significant jump. So for example, in France and Germany, I think we'll see it looking, feeling, and people working more like in the UK and the US, and that's sort of more flexible working rather than you have to be in the office. For small, medium businesses, which is the majority of, where the majority of people are employed, they need to work together, because everybody's having to multitask. They need to be in close communication. Trust is important. So we're going to see, and I see already here, lots of small businesses getting back and working together. And human behavior hasn't changed. People in the boss's face are still likely to get promoted. So, it doesn't matter about, we have a new normal here. People are people, and that's going to drive, a return, not completely, but a return to, closer to where we are at the moment. And we will forget. That's one thing I can guarantee. As we saw 100 years ago, what, it's like to be in the pandemic, and people will go back to their normal behaviors. But as I said, we've jumped forward. In the programmable communication space, we've got 75 billion has been created. In the main, thanks to open source technologies, they've created a massive market and really changed the communications and telecoms business. Also, recognizing it's a smartphone, voice, messaging, both SMS and IP, camera for both pictures and video, the browser for signing documents, all your processes, and all the contextual information about the device and the user, the phone number, the account, all the rest of it, location. It's amazing how we haven't taken advantage of that to improve customer experiences, but that is changing. We've seen unprecedented consolidation. You've seen that ramp up in all the acquisitions. It's mainly been within the programmable communication space, but we're going to see in the coming years more enterprises, web companies joining this spree. For example, Okta, I showed that they bought Auth0. I think they're going to need more than 2FA for mobile authentication. So look at some of those companies in the programmable comms space to get acquired by Okta. Think of programmable communications as telecoms done in a web way. Now, a question is, who's likely to act fast, telcos or enterprise web companies? Well, we know the answer. So programmable comms is on a very different trajectory to where the telecoms business is. And that's going to impact telcos through the rest of this decade. So in programmable communications, we really do live in interesting times. And even after the pandemic, it's going to remain very interesting. So that's my piece done. On resources and questions, my weblog, I run a CX Tech newsletter, weekly programmable comms newsletter with opinion. I have the TADSummit weblog, so all the TADSummit material will be there. We have for this year, but also last year, you just go to the agenda and all the content is available there. A plug for myself, if you're looking for independent analysis, insight, advice, strategy, thought leadership, business, market development, for anything comms, telecoms related, contact me. I'm here to help. So thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. Bye-bye.